I wanted to share a practice I've been doing lately and some background around it. I've really been working with speech. Actually, for a long time, I've been trying to pay attention to improve my speech, not my eloquence and not my mumbling, for which I have certainly been corrected, but more the tone and the tenor of my speech is something I've been working with for a while, and not finding that I was making much progress in it. I have a quick tongue. When my mother died, at some point, her husband said, "Your mother had the fastest mouth I ever met in my life." And I thought, oh, that's where I learned it. Fastest mouth. And it made me a lot of money when I was a cocktail waitress and a bartender in my early 20s. A smart mouth did quite well. And, it was used as a defense. I've really examined this to see that in a very difficult, sometimes situation as a child, it was my protection. It was the way I stayed out of trouble and stayed away from the harm that was happening around me. So I see that sometimes the speech comes up as defense personally, and I also really rise up to defend the group when I feel like somehow it's been maligned or something. So I've been studying the karma of all the issues of speech, right? Of the 4 non-virtuous actions of speech: the lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle talk. I have done them all, and in some ways I feel like I was trained to practice them all as a way of life. And I think this is pretty common. Venerable often talks about how we're not going out killing people. We may kill bugs mindlessly, but we're not killing people. But we sure, our words flow. She calls them our weapons of mass destruction, our own speech. Really having thought about, analyzed what are the karmic results? Thinking about the defects of this. So when we lie, which is something, having taken the 5 lay precepts, that one I could start to get a handle on, but I was shocked to discover when I first took those precepts many years ago that lying was the hardest one of those 5 to keep. Not big lies, but the little ones that were just covering up for, oh yeah, I was late because of traffic. I wasn't late because of traffic, I was late because I stayed on the phone too long, or I was late because I had another cup of tea before I left, or something like that. So those little kinds of lies were the slippery ones. So that seems okay now. The divisive speech. And what's the karmic result of those lies? People lie to you. You have this experience of not having truthful interactions with people. It's one of them. Divisive speech is a little bit harder to keep an eye on, because sometimes just in the sense of wanting to connect with people, what do we have in common? Well, we both don't like him. So to use our speech in a way to mindlessly kind of create a sense of camaraderie with somebody, often at the expense of somebody else. And I see this true about our humor in this country. So much of it, professionally, and also just humor around the dining room table, is at the expense of somebody else, which to me looks like divisive speech. And part of the karmic result of that is that our relationships are not harmonious with other people, right? So I'm giving the karmic result because sometimes we don't notice that we have the habit, but we experience the result. Like, oh, my relationships aren't so harmonious. What does that mean? That means in the past, I was engaging in some divisive speech or something like that. Harsh speech, we can recognize the yelling, the screaming, the harsh words, the bad language, foul language. Not so easy, too, to recognize coming from our own mouth, the little smart zing. Sarcasm, particularly. And the result of that, of course, or criticism, right? The result of that is to receive criticism and those kinds of things. And then even idle talk, which is so easy to slide into. if we're consciously having a conversation about something not very important with the wish to connect with somebody, that's one thing. But so easily that slides into some story of my past, or some movie I saw, or some adventures that I had, or what it was like to go out drinking when I was 22, and we've gone on and started spending our own time and everybody else's time on something that's not very meaningful, and now we've lost our motivation for making that connection too, and now we're way into idle talk. And the result of idle talk is that people don't pay much attention to what you say. People don't take you very seriously. So we all have experienced both doing these things. We all, if we think about it, have experienced the karmic results of those things. And so was working with speech on really trying to pay attention to my motivation and cultivate loving kindness so that the smart zings didn't fly out so easily. And all those are very good antidotes. But what I've come to lately is this thing of washing the mouth out with soap. Right? So I know there's a frown. What? I looked at it online. I don't think I ever had this in my life, but my mother threatened it a few times. And I know, I worked on the Cherokee Reservation for a number of years, and I know a woman who, when I knew her, she was in her 80s, but as a young Cherokee had gone to the American school, and her mouth had been washed out with lye soap to completely destroy the Cherokee language, and she never spoke it again. So it is, in that context, definitely a violent way of punishing children. I looked online to see if people are still doing this, and I see that they are. And I also see that some people have been arrested. One person was put into prison for a year for washing a child's mouth out with soap. So there's a lot of controversy around this. So I don't want to mean it in that negative state. But what I have been experimenting with is when I'm doing my purification practice with Vajrasattva, imagining that light and nectar becomes like the soap bubbles, that are soap bubbles of nectar, not nasty soap, not incriminating, not punishing soap, but are really cleansing, purifying, nectar-like bubbles that are, as you do the visualization, people who may not know this practice, you have this particular Buddha on your head, could be any deity, and after going through the four opponent powers and or beginning with the four opponent powers, recalling incidents, generating regret, taking refuge, generating your bodhicitta again, going through the recitations and the prayers, then visualizing that light and nectar pours from the Buddha above the crown of your head, and that light and nectar is flushing out the negativities. Now, that Buddha is not washing away your negativities, but through the mental process of doing that as a remedial action, your own mind is what's doing the purification here. But to really start to get off on this image of these little bubbles flowing out of your mouth, cleansing, and then inside the bubbles, what are there instead? Oh, there's loving language, and there's beautiful things, and I start to get this image of like little Christmas balls filled with gifts for other people, and the speech can go out and touch people's heads. It's really been fun, and I think it's having an effect. Far more than a good long time now of analysis and trying to like control things. I'm not saying that the analysis and the control hasn't helped. It has. But this way of using the visualization and has just been really fun. So as I thought about what's really up for me these days, well, it's that. I'm doing my best to speak less, or to make sure that I pause before I speak so that I'm clear with what's coming out rather than an instinctive reaction. But this visualization of doing the light and nectar as a purifying soap bubbles, sort of even transforming the washing the mouth out with soap negative thing, but washing one's mouth out with virtue is something else altogether. One little note to add here that I thought was an interesting thing, and this is new because as I said, I went online to see if people still do this, seeing that they do. But one psychologist talked about how parents can use ways of disciplining their smart mouth talkback children besides doing something as harmful as washing their mouth out with soap. And he said, you need to model good speech. And he said one of the things that he advises parents to do is when they start to have this interaction with the kid is to turn the record button on their telephone, which I guess people's telephones now do, and listen to your own interaction. And he said it is not surprising that parents listen and hear that the same snarky tone that they are trying to punish their kids for has come out of their mouth just in that exchange. So it also made me think too that that's another element that I'd like to add, is to pay attention when I feel like, first of all, that there's speech coming at me that I don't like, to remember that this is a karmic result. This is a result of my own past negative actions, to bring that to mind. But also to take that a step further and go, well, maybe in this moment I've just modeled this exact same thing. And the person is responding to me in kind, rather than harming me in some way. And then the next step is to try to not have that defensive language, but to just hold still and let it pass through. The sound waves are just passing through. And let the bubbles of the purifying wisdom of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas purify the mind and transform my speech in order to become more like them, and in order to be more effective in my caring and cultivating a kindness in the way I want to be with other people. So, enjoy your meditation.